On this edition of Tokens with Toast, we're going to discuss the ERC20 Token Standard and just some of the basic methods that surround it. And we're going to learn what to look out for when we're reading about an ERC20 token contract. So it is just an interface. That's one thing that's kind of a misconception. The standard just describes an interface. It just states that you shall implement these methods and doesn't necessarily state what the method should do, although there are some general guidelines and thoughts that, a transfer will transfer the tokens to someone else, balance of will give you your balance, and total supply will tell you the total supply of the token. And that's true 99% of the time. Just know that it's possible to be ERC20, but also bend some of these rules and not necessarily follow them. That's why we need to read the verified contracts on Etherscan or other services. So let's actually get down to the meat here. This particular template is very common. It was made by BokkyPooBah, who's kind of a renowned Ethereum researcher and developer. This describes a fixed supply token in which the token starts with a fixed supply that can never change. And we'll see they implement safe math here, which just prevents some math overflow. That's important. We add an ERC20 interface. So this ERC20 interface describes the actual methods that are going to be used by the contract. And again, this is what is actually defined by the specification. The rest is really just kind of a sample of how you might implement it. But as far as other smart contracts interact with tokens, all they have to add, like let's say a DEX contract, all they have to add is this. And they can kind of proxy call these methods from the token contract. And that's how you get the interoperability between dApps and tokens. We're going to ignore this for now, approve and call. That's optional usually. Nothing to be alarmed about if you see it. The owned contract here is actually going to be, it's typically going to be built into the token, so it's going to be inherited by the token contract. So the token contract in this case is inheriting all of the variables and all of the events and methods of this contract. And in this case, you can see what happens is the message.sender, the person who deploys the contract, will be set as the owner. And they'll be able to do some special things. First of all, they'll be able to call any method. They and only them can call any method with the modifier only owner. And then they can transfer their ownership to somebody else. And then whoever else could accept the ownership, of course. So this contract, as we can see, is inheriting owned. It's inheriting the ERC20 interface. So it's going to be required to have all of these methods here. Transfer, approve, balance of, total supply, obviously. Those are good to have for a token. And then we'll see here, this is just where some of the variables and mappings are kind of like arrays. So this is kind of like where the arrays are defined. This is important. This is the array that holds everyone's balances, obviously. This is the array that holds who is allowed to interact with whose tokens. We'll talk about that. But this is, they're setting a symbol, a name, some decimals, total supply. And then the balances owner equals total supply. What this means is we're going to give all the tokens to the owner right when the contract deploys. You see that? So it's the array of who owns which tokens. And then we're going to take the cell of that belongs to the owner address, Ethereum address. And we're going to set basically their balance to the total supply. So they're going to own all the tokens initially. This is extremely common. You'll see this in basically every fixed supply ERC20 token. That's kind of the definition of a fixed supply token almost, where this occurs. So the deployer starts with all of them. And then this is just the reader method for the total supply, reader method for balances. You can check people's balances. This is the method that allows you to transfer your tokens to someone else, but you have to be the actual owner. This is different. Transfer from allows you to transfer somebody else's tokens on their behalf, but you have to have allowance from them. They have to give you the approve, basically, to do that. This is just used, these two are used together to interact with smart contracts like DEXs or other dApps. You give approval to the smart contract, and then the smart contract will call transfer from on your tokens, basically. And then this just checks how much you're allowed. So, a dApp might use this to check how many it's allowed by somebody. And then approve and call, that's what we saw up there. This is optional. It allows one to basically embed a method into a token, or into like a dApp contract that allows someone to approve their tokens for the dApp and call the method simultaneously. So it just makes for one ETH transaction instead of two. Not a big deal. Just saves on some gas. Sometimes it saves on some user experience, but it's totally optional. This prevents people from sending Ether right into the contract on accident. And then this allows the owner to suck out any tokens that are sent into the contract. You'll see only owner here. That's where the modifier is used, where the owner actually matters in this case. And so that's kind of a general overview of a standard ERC20 token contract. And if you understand all of this, you'll understand all the building blocks of Solidity contracts, and you'll really start to gain a better understanding of how this all works.